the whole purpose for doing a letter is to break up the sheet that you're working on so that you begin to understand the relationship between positive and negative. So the letters help you to find different ways of composing. Basically for abstractionists. Realists don't need it. They just do squares and rectangles. But what we're going to do is just take the letter, manipulate it, and then turn it into an action once we see what it's doing. So I'll do 2 of them. Now, a lot of you guys will do multiple letters, all kinds of stuff. Anything that will give you a breakup of your form, and you're not even worried about making something. You see the result of what you're doing. For example, if you run your letter dead center, that's what you're doing with your work. And that's why your work is boring. So you want to find an action off of that. So you start by tilting the letter to aggravate the space around it. So it's an exercise to help you see both the form and the natural and the neutral space. And you work quick. You don't think about it. You lay it in and see what you're doing, because you're finding out a couple of things. One, you're finding out how the tension occurs when you're developing shapes around and towards each other, and how you're changing them and manipulating the color on the outside and the inside. Now I'm going to do this black and white and make it easy. I mean, you know, it's hard enough, you know. Okay, here I go. See, what do I got here? Well, that looks good. I'll do that. So I'll do a simple beginning of the belt. A lot of people use their name. They do all kinds of things. Okay, so you take the idea of the letter A, making a shape out of it, and then run another letter inside if you feel like it. So what the hell, we'll do it. Now I do this, I always try to get you guys to do these exercises first in black and white, because once you lay the color becomes more complicated. So what I try to get you guys to do is use black and white, then black, white, and a color, and then eventually color against color. So you begin to understand expansion and contraction of the color and how little you really need to make it explode. Okay, that's a J and an A. Son of a gun. Now, I'll run a more interesting color here. We'll run a C. Now, the first thing you want to look at is the action of the negative space. In other words, what is the negative space doing at the moment? The masses and the sizes on the outside of the black makes the black either interesting or not. So it all depends on how you're developing it, what you're doing with it, how well it's going to consume itself. We never know. Okay, I'll run a little gray in here just to annoy everybody. Damn, I did that pretty good. I'll be damned. All right, now we'll work on the negative space. We'll pull it up. When you pull the negative space up in some places, it should affect the negative places in others. So we'll start what I call with the anchor, which is usually the upper right-hand corner. Once I push this space forward, this space automatically slides under. The first thing you're learning, when you change the position of your color or your form, you begin to create tension. That tension is what space is about in a painting. A lot of people are under the illusion of perspective creating a space. It doesn't. It pushes things in space, but it doesn't create space. Space is created by the action as the eye looks at the form in motion. Now, I'll do the same thing over here. Here we go. By changing the action of that, I can play with the action of everything else. Now, I'll run the white under the black at the bottom, theoretically. Now these exercises, Vidlachil had us do these, and as students we'd have hundreds of them by the end of the day. And then he would come along and we'd take 5 of them and put them up and see which ones actually worked, you know. The tendency for most people is to start thinking of creating from it right away, and that's losing the idea of the purpose. Okay, now, if I want to change the direction that I've used within the structure itself, I paint through it, which turns to a gray. I'll run a gray over here. We'll see what the gray does, if anything. Well, I'll be damned, that's getting interesting. How did that happen? Okay, so we run this over the bottom line, we break through the J. Build up some of the weight on the inside, but always keep it behind the black line, so that the action of each area feels like it's in motion. If it's not in motion, we've killed the tension. Once you kill the tension, the painting's lost. You turn it around, do another one. Unless you're into decorating, that's a whole other ballgame. Now, there we go. Thank you. Thank you. And then we'll go back to this later when it's a little dry, and we'll run black into it again, just to shift things a little bit. So by building up the volume here, I'm making a tension going in the inside to outside, hopefully. Keep that black on top. So you can see how easy that is. Now, we'll take the letter here and we'll run through it. We'll do a whole different approach. We'll break through the letter, see what kind of shift we may or may not get as we're doing this. So you begin to find an interest as the areas start to break up into different sizes and different movements. You're starting to get more interest. This is the same thing when you're doing your abstraction or your representational work. You don't want it to sit on a horizontal vertical all the time because it's boring. So you want to find a way to get that action and keep the simplicity of your idea very good. Like you guys, some of you at the beginning of the painting, I kind of like to stop you from working because that's the end of the painting at the very beginning. 10 minutes later, it's dead. No. So now here, I'll run this on the outside. And then plane up the color here as a driving force going into the inside of the letter with any luck at all. Not bad. I'll be damned. Run this at this angle. Okie dokie. Run this under, under, under. Move it into different directions. Create an action. Bring that action down. Now the form is you beginning to create a relationship both large and small throughout the whole piece. A letter A at any point can disappear at some point, usually does, but its action is always there. So it shows you how simple this is. Now you ought to be able to do 50 of these, don't you think? Okay, so we adjust certain things. We run this a little bit over here. So it's on top. So this is sliding under, this is coming forward. I do that throughout the whole painting. I do it with you guys when I'm correcting your work. I'm pulling one this way, pulling another one that way. As every time I change the position of those forms, your expansion gets bigger and larger. Because you're reacting to the eye. The eye likes movement. If it doesn't get any movement, it walks away. You watch people in a gallery, you have one line going down the middle of the page. It doesn't mean much, you know. Now I'll run this over and then run the yellow, bring the black up here, change the position of the, well, I'll be damned. Change position of the J a little bit. Run this over the edge. There we go. As I push these under, it's trying to pull the top forward. So I'm always working up and down the plane. Now, I asked Vid about that once, and he said, well, the eye is lazy. If you do all your action at the bottom of your painting, it'll go there and the rest of the painting disappears. If you go rise the eye up through the middle section up, the eye will go there and come down because it'll come down on its own. You don't have to fuss. So you try to keep your highest contrast in the middle or the upper part of your painting, and you'll always have more strength and more interest in your work. Now, we're talking about the structure line. We're not talking about the creativity. Your creativity is boundless. You have thousands of different ways of doing it, and that's fine. But the basic principle that helps you to load the eye with the idea of your emotional content within your work is the placement of your forms and the action of your volumes. These exercises help build an idea. It helps build a better eye. You start to see things differently. Like I steal from everybody, even you. If you're doing something good, I take it back to the studio. Work it up. Okay, now let's, I don't like that. So now we'll start patterns. We'll play with patterns a little bit. Patterns are interesting because they create small ideas within big ideas pretty quickly. So we'll run a horizontal panel on one side. We'll do a horizontal and a vertical on the other. As we start playing with the idea of verticals and horizontals, we're breaking up the volume into different positions and having it relate to the bigger idea. If you notice, your eye keeps moving. Doesn't stay in one spot. It has an action. That action is the stimuli of your work. How and what you use is, to me, amazing. I mean, you guys are highly creative. I asked most of you what the hell you're doing in here. You know how to paint, you know. You won't answer. I'm not having a show, so I can't find any reason, you know. So I just wait, you know, I'll wait. Eventually you'll tell me. Now to see will give us all kinds of ideas. Let's play with the idea of the broken plane. You guys have seen me do this 100 times in my own work as I'm doing watercolors. Of course, you don't know it. I'm doing them for you. Some of you are smart enough to watch. Now this is called a rhythmic action. That rhythmic action is all well and good because you're abstracting. You're no longer moving in the literal world. You're moving in an inner world. That inner world has to do with energy and power and all that. In this particular idea, it's all about what's going to happen if you do it. You don't know. The painters, the thing that I've understood about painters are not big on words. They are very big on visual. The people that talk the less in a room are usually painters. The people that talk the most are poets. They like words. And they like to expose themselves as much as possible. Painters tend to like to withdraw and watch everybody so they can figure out what they can take home, see. Now, am I going to get that cheesecake, you know? So I will play with this action, and then I will drive a movement across it so it's always sliding even with this. It's not jumping ahead of that corner. Got that? Everybody's pretty good here. Okay, now I'll do it at the bottom, but I will make it smaller. The size of that relates to the largeness of that. Keeps the eye moving. But it also gives the eye a moment of interest. Okay, now I'll do the vertical right into this. Against this. Keep that corner. then overlap it again. Every time I overlap, I push it back. By overlapping, it pushes it under. It doesn't go like miles away, it just slides under. So it has a relationship to that. So you're continuing an idea without making big, bold movements every time. The problem a lot of you have is that you have a beautiful painting and then you put action all around it and kill the very essence of your piece. If you keep the area around your major action a little quieter, a little shifter, maybe echoes of tones of those colors, you get a much stronger painting, and your action is always alive. As soon as the action of your painting dies, so does your painting. It's a terrible death, you know. $25 for a little, it's a lot of money, man, to kill yourself like that. This one does perfect designs now. Except she'll do blue on one side and red on the other, which I've never understood. Yeah. Okay, now let me break through this, the C here, hopefully. See what happens. Here we go. We're going to break through and cut this line. Run that gray there. Okay. Run that line here. Okay. By breaking the action of this, at some point, you have to go back, hopefully. And bring the edge over. This is how meticulous this damn thing gets. So if I pull the black over the edge of the white here, and over the edge here, it starts to shift. It has an interaction with the one here, which is underneath. Okay? So everything is doing this as I go up. Changing the position of your color or your form is very important to your piece. Like if you look at really good still life painters like Cezanne, you run a ruler on there, nothing is sitting on that line. This table's a little higher, this part of the table a little lower. This action's going in that direction. He'll have a spoon going off the edge so the eye meets here and goes up. Very sharp. They don't do that for the hell of it, you know. Of course, Cezanne wouldn't let anybody watch him paint either. He's pretty smart. You know. You damn well watch them, you know. Okay. Now, as I'm working back and forth here, playing with these edges every chance I get, pulling things as the volume is a little too strong, bringing it down, bringing it up, running the center line like at an angle. There we go. Make a plane here. All right, I'll be damned. How did I do that? I'm getting too good at this. I did about 150 of these as a student. Now, I would use the newspaper. I liked doing the exercise on the editorial section. You know, it was kind of like getting even with the paper, see? So then I would cut it up, collage it, I would play with it. All to identify what my forms were going to do. The painting was way in the future. My whole purpose for the first year was to understand, which was very hard for me because I had learned how to paint in an academic fashion where you lay down a nice rhythm on the surface, but it had no relationship to the surface it was in. Villaggio made me relate the surface. That's what I'm doing here. I'm taking the surface of the paper and reintroducing it into the form. So everything becomes a part of the relationship. That makes your painting already different from every other painting you see. Unless they study with me. or Vit. Yeah. We all felt, all the guys I knew that was with Vitlichel all felt like we were very special because we were getting all Hofmann's theories in English. The guys that were studying with Hofmann were getting it in German. And if they didn't understand German, they only got about that much. And because the guy explaining it to you, he may not understand German either, but you don't know. Now, reading his, it's hard to find stuff written by him. But every once in a while you get quotes, and I'm always picking up quotes. I go through the book and I look for what he said. And he said some miraculous things. And over a period of 60-some years, his idea about painting shifted quite a bit. Because he understood one thing. Everything that I'm teaching you and trying to get you to see and understand and apply is not the art. The art is in you. You're trying to find a better way to assemble your concepts. And that's all this is. This is the basis that people kind of disregard until it's too late. Now, you have an aim, a relationship, and you start looking at great painting. You look at Rembrandt, you look at Titian, you look at Klein. Even de Kooning at odd moments does really powerful work. These guys were not painting marks on a surface. They were interacting with those actions to create a whole. Now I got one lady, that lady back there, that makes dots. All kinds of colors. But when she's through, she has control of that two-dimensional surface. That's understanding what the color is going to do, how the action of those dots are to each other. So it isn't the technique, it is how you apply that technique, how that technique gives you the energy you need. And like this one, began to understand she drew well and then screwed it up trying to be exciting. So I went back and got her to bring the damn drawing out. Get the form down, get the shape down, get the action down first, then play if you want. When you have an idea on your painting, you don't want to do a painting and decide, oh, I think I'll throw red in it. Bad move. You don't want to set up the red unless it's already sitting on your table. Because your subconscious is full of identity of life as you live. You have a wealth of things flying through you, but it's all coming from your subconscious. When you abstract, you are removing yourself from the literal every minute. The further you get away, the stronger your work gets. The more exciting your color is in relationship to each other, the more powerful the work. So you begin to understand that painting isn't just making a mark and walking away. Theoretically. Now, let me run an action line here, and see what we get. Now I'm going to push, overlapping, I'm going to push an action. Okay, dots is good. As you get more color or more tone next to each other, they change the weight. Then you have to go back and hope for the best. Yeah. Let me see what I got here. I adjust it. I change its position every time I adjust it. The overall gets a little more interesting. There we go. Now, okay, let me break it up some more. God, the J disappeared entirely. I'll be damned. So, you know, you can see how easy it is when you're just working with black and white. Color, and I tell you guys every time you pick up a color, but color changes everything. So once you throw a color up there, we'll do that down the road maybe in April. I'll do a colors thing. You find out real quick that the color controls you. You don't control the color. Once you throw the color up there, it's telling you what it wants. And if you don't give it to it, the painting dies. Takes a deep breath and falls off the end of the pier, you know? So what I'm doing is seeing where I can get things to move just a little bit more. Rid of the silliness. Well, that's looking pretty good. Now, it's about painting it out. If we do that, of course I'm not going to do that because then you wouldn't learn anything, but it's fun to think about. Now I'm using gesso as a white because it's cheap. There we go. And there we go. Now, I did that to show how that action creates a dimension that wasn't there before. It's pushing towards you. The idea of getting the exercise so you can feel the movements push away and back is good. Copying won't help. When you do a letter and you break that letter up into actions, a relationship to the negative space, that's all about you. You're taking it completely from what you know or you don't know. If you screw it up, you keep scissors ready. You turn it around, do the back. If that doesn't work, you cut it up. Collage it. So it's not about a specific. It is about the action of the relationships of all your volumes and planes as they move. That's your action. Everything is a count on that. I set these up totally insane because you have to force yourself to A, change the color, or B, crop it to formulate an idea so that you begin to find your individuality in everything you do. Now, David, he likes to copy. I'm glad he does because I'm going to get him to get the signature right and then we're going to make some money. But at some point, copying has to stop. And he has to look at the world that he lives in, walk through the park, sit down, look at the movement of the branches, start sketching. But give them the same sense that you got from the ideas that you copied from. In other words, copying is an age-old system that painters used before we had magazines. You forget. 1400s, there wasn't a lot of printed things about Titian. You had to go look at Titian, see how he laid things in, and do sketches. They were better painters because they did that. We're losing a lot of information and wasting a lot of time by not going to the museum and picking out paintings that you're not necessarily care about painting, but how did they put it together? What is the shape of the form? You look at a Rubens, you get this all the time. Within that, there'll be a square of figures. Within that. And then there'll be a bigger one. That would be like a tree and a bush and a guy standing there. That Baroque movement, which broke down because nobles lost their power, and then people wanted more reasoning, and they got really tight and started doing this. Individuals, the guy in the bath. So there's all these actions today that you can take the same ideas from, but give them a different sensibility, because you're working in forms and color and not so much about identifying the action that you're working with. It is the mass. In other words, if I run this area in red, there's a power in that color. If I threw tones of green around it, it would start to do this. But I would have to relate something. Now I started this because this is easier for you to do. You do them in a second. Little pad. The way you are is going to end up in your drawing. If you're tight, like when I go to the studio, I take a big scribble pencil and I work. And if everything is doing this, I know I'm not ready to paint. So I stop and I just relax. Sometimes I only get a half hour painting time, but the painting is better because I'm not fighting the painting, waiting for my hand, my mind, and my eye to coexist. See, that's what his problem is. He got too many shapes, but they're all little skinny things. You got to get a mass. Get that mass in there and live with it. Make it a red, make it an orange, make it a problem, and then solve it. That's the thing you do when you're learning. I always knew when I walked into school, I wasn't here to compete, I was here to learn. I took my ego and set it outside the door and went in and did whatever the instructor told me. When I left, I picked my ego back up and went to the studio. But I knew I was here to learn, nothing else. Once I got that, once I had the language, the action, and the reality of it, I had the world. And 50 years later, I'm still playing with it. Yeah. Although now I don't have any light in my studio, so I have no idea what's happening here. Okay, so we let this dry a little bit. Let's expand, see if we can expand the idea and see what happens. Well, we can't do much. Let's take the yellow, okay, here we go. So I make a section here, section here, section here. I'll be damned. And run this plane over here, like so. Taking the idea of the A, splitting it quite a bit, pushing that white back, making it thinner, quicker. Okay, I got a pretty good movement on that. Let's see what happens. Now this one, if you leave this space quiet place, you can do that. Of course, I'm a little silly. I tend to want to build it a little bit. Let me play with it just a little. This should gray out quite a bit. Yep. So I took the quiet zone, gave it a little action. But it didn't hurt the overall movement because of that. Keeping that your forward plane, you can play a little bit in here. You can't do that in color, but you can do it in black and white and gray. If you do it in color, you always end up in trouble. Now, normally, when I'm painting and I have a quiet area like that, I do that and I let it dry because I work in oil. So I set it up for a couple months, I pull it down, I take a fax medium, I put it in a tone of white and I go over the whole thing. And then all those elements sit underneath it and do this. So I'm controlling the movement and the position. And that's the game of painting, theoretically. All right, now, just saw that, I'll be damned. Okay, so now there's the J. Let's not let that go all the way across. Okay, here we go. Let's break through here. Whenever you run up a form or you change the position of a form, you then have to let it dry and bring one over. And that's what I'm going to do eventually. I promise. Yeah. I don't work with the same size brush all the time either. That's one of the biggest problems a lot of you have. You have one brush and you do a 50-foot canvas with a little tiny brush. You know? I never understood that. Flip this over the head. Let this slide under. Flip this over the edge. That slide under. Come on, you bastard, get up there. There we go. Perfect. Now, let's run the white to the outside of the gray. Pull this over the edge here. Get grayed out on me, you bastard. If I pull the surface up in some areas to the action on top, I constantly change the position of the surface and introduce it into the painting so that everything becomes a part of each other. Now, this is pretty simple, I know, but just in case you didn't know. Behind there, over here. There we go. Okay. Now, with black and white, you get a lot of light, I think. I mean, I really don't know. I'm too close to it. Well, I think you get a lot of light. Let me run this up here. Okay, now we'll take this apart and see if there's anything there that's interesting. As soon as I correct this. Stubborn little devil. Okay. Right here. Okay, here we go, here we go, here we go. Very good. Not perfect, but close enough. Okay, let's see what happens.